The butterflies. Janet drove down the quiet, dusty road, the barren fields stretching out as far as the eye could see, with the soft glow of the sunrise breaking over the horizon. A swarm of butterflies fluttered in her stomach. Just a few months ago, she'd graduated from beauty school, clutching a certificate she was proud of, and although it wasn't studded with perfect grades, it was enough to keep her dream alive. She'd always imagined working in cosmetics, making up the faces of the actors and actresses she idolized at the movie house. Going to the drive-ins had become a weekend habit, but now with money tight, she could barely afford the popcorn. Her father, bless him, eventually loaned her his car after much fussing. He never much approved of her beauty school ambitions. "That school's for girls with no brains, Janet," he'd say. "Why don't you pick something respectable like being a secretary?" Lord knows, he'd be pleased as punch if she just found herself a husband and settled down to raise a family. But Janet had no interest in that life. It was 1954, after all, and while the world was slowly changing, most women she knew were stuck in small-town lives, looking after small homes with even smaller dreams. You could see it in their eyes, the quiet resentment, the sadness. Janet refused to end up like that. Her father wasn't a bad man. He was kind and gentle, just set in his ways. He didn't push too hard, but he'd made his position clear. If Janet didn't find work by the end of the month, he'd get her a job typing in his office. This, today, was her last chance. As she pulled up to the tall iron gates of the plantation, the butterflies in her stomach danced even harder. The house ahead was grand but warm somehow, sitting in the middle of acres of land, with a big orchard full of bright red apples stretching out on one side. The sun had fully risen now, casting a soft, golden glow on the bright white exterior. Janet gathered her kit and headed toward the front door, which was framed by thick bunches of white roses. The porch was lined with garlands of flowers, and everything about the place seemed ready for the big day ahead. A middle-aged man, jolly and round, swung the door open. "Well, good mornin'. Ain't it a beautiful day for a weddin'? You must be the makeup girl. Come on in, honey, my daughter's upstairs waitin' for you." Janet nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. She was here to do the bride and 6 bridesmaids, a mountain of a task, but she was determined to prove herself. Plus, she knew this could be the break she needed. Word of mouth in a place like this could do wonders for her business. As she climbed the stairs, she heard the excited chatter of the bride and her bridesmaids floating down the hall. She knocked gently on the door. "Come in." A voice chirped from inside. Janet stepped into a room full of happy, bustling energy. "Good morning. I'm Janet, I'm here too. To make us beautiful." One of the bridesmaids interrupted with a laugh. The bride smiled warmly. "Come on in, sugar, put your things down and help yourself to some breakfast. You must have driven a long way. We've got more food than we know what to do with." She stuck out her hand. "I'm Mary, the unlucky one getting hitched today." Janet grinned, grabbed an apple from the table, likely picked from the orchard outside, and felt some of her nerves slip away. The girls were friendly and welcoming, making the task ahead feel a little less daunting. Janet worked quickly but skillfully, moving from bridesmaid to bridesmaid. This was the fastest she'd ever worked, but pressure always brought out the best in her. Finally, Mary sat down in the chair in front of her. "Can you make me look like Grace Kelly?" she joked, flashing a grin. "I can try," Janet replied with a smile, reaching into her kit for her brush. As the bridesmaids left to check on the final details outside, the room fell quiet. It was just Janet and Mary now. Mary sighed, glancing at the door. "Can you close that, darlin'? There's a bit of a draft." Janet hesitated. The room felt warm, almost too warm with the southern summer sun pouring through the windows, but she closed the door anyway. As she walked back to Mary, she sensed a shift in the air. The excited buzz was gone, replaced by something heavier, something Janet couldn't quite place. "You okay?" Janet asked, her voice soft. Mary's eyes flickered with hesitation. I need your help," she whispered, her voice trembling. Janet's stomach tightened. "My name isn't Mary," she continued, her voice barely audible. "It's Velma Wilson. They took me when I was 7, from a bus station in Charleston. They told me they were my new family. Their daughter, Isabel, died, and I was her replacement. This is her room." Tears welled up in Velma's eyes, and her hands shook as she tried to choke back sobs. "The man they want me to marry, he doesn't know who I am. They've kept me locked up here, and I just want to go home." Janet's mind raced. She remembered the heavy iron bolts on the outside of Mary's, Velma's, bedroom door. She hadn't given them a second thought before, but now, everything made sense. "I tried to escape once," Velma said, her voice shaking, "but they found me. This place is so far from town, and there's nowhere to hide." Janet's heart pounded in her chest. She was scared, terrified, even, but there was no turning back now. "You have a car, right?" Velma asked, her eyes wide with desperation. "You can take me with you. Please. Let's go. Right now." Janet nodded, barely able to find her voice. "Yes. Let's go. Now. Velma grabbed a few clothes and a small tin box from behind her wardrobe. Hide this, she whispered, handing it to Janet. It's all I have. They crept down the stairs, their hearts racing in unison. The house was filled with cheerful chatter, but no one was in the hallway as they reached the landing. If they see me, they'll kill us both, Velma whispered. They had two choices: run for the car as fast as they could, or walk calmly down the stairs and hope no one noticed. Janet took the first step. Velma followed. Seconds stretched into hours. They reached the front door. Just as Janet's hand touched the doorknob, a voice boomed from behind them. "Ha! Y'all ready for the party tonight?" They froze, turning to see Velma's father walking past the doorway to the kitchen. He didn't see them. Janet threw open the door. They ran to the car, hearts pounding, legs moving faster than they ever had before. Janet started the engine, her hands shaking. She hit the gas, and they sped down the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. As they drove through the iron gates, neither of them spoke. Their bodies trembled, and cold sweat dripped down their pale faces. They had made it. Velma broke the silence first. I'm sorry for asking this of you. I've been waiting so long for someone from the outside to come. I never gave up hope." As they drove, Velma spoke about the abuse she suffered at the hands of her adopted family. When she arrived at the house as a child, they kept her in the rat-infested cellar for 2 years, with only scraps of food and barely any water. At the height of summer, the cellar would get so hot that the rats would be inflicted with madness and nibble at her flesh. Her eyesight deteriorated because of the constant dim light. She had no one and nothing except the creatures that hid in the darkness. When they removed her from the cellar, her starved, emaciated body was also struck with leptospirosis, a disease given to her by her companions from the dark. She barely survived and said that she hoped death would come for her, to take her from this house of horror and send her to heaven where she would find peace with God. However, death was not on the cards for Velma as she miraculously survived the decay and disease. The man of the house, her father, was a God-fearing man. He had a deep obsession with the Old Testament and believed this God was the true Father. He would make Velma recite passages for hours at a time, and if she complained or made a mistake, she would be savagely beaten. Her body is a map of scars left by the wrath of a mad man. Her mother was a different kind of evil. She was sadistic, manipulative, and had an affinity for torture, both physical and mental. On her 12th birthday, her mother baked her a cake. When she took a bite, something felt wrong. It was then that a severed rat's tail fell from it. Velma had endured unimaginable torture at the house, and Janet's heart broke for her. The girls wept together along the long, dusty road to freedom. They finally reached a gas station, and even though they were both terrified to stop, the tank was running low and they were left with no choice. Janet filled the car and entered the station. She asked the lady behind the desk if she had a telephone, and if she did, could she call the sheriff. "Sure, sweetie, but that'll be $1 on top of the tank of gas." Velma appeared behind her with her little tin box. Taking out $1, she handed it to the cashier. "Here, ma'am. Can you please ask him to get here as soon as he can?" The cashier disappeared behind the curtain to the back of the shop. "Hey Sheriff, it's Linda from the gas station on 46 at Liberty. I got a couple of young gals here looking for help." "No idea what it's about, Sheriff. They wandered on in about a minute ago. Look pretty shaken up if you ask me. Can you make it quick, Sheriff?" As the woman walks back through the curtain, she tells the girls they can wait in the back till the sheriff gets there. The girls take her up on her offer and head into the musty back shop. A minute passes, then 20, then the ding of the bell on the gas station door breaks them from their silent trance. The sheriff is here. Just as Janet reaches for the curtain, she hears a familiar voice. She stops in her tracks and holds her breath. "Hey Linda, ain't seen a couple of young gals come through this way, have ya?" It was the voice of Velma's father. The girls' lives depended on what the cashier said next. Was she going to send them to their death, or worse, a life of never-ending torture? Or was she a woman in touch with her sixth sense, enough to understand that the girls were running from something terrible? Would she err on the side of caution and keep their presence a secret? The girls desperately hoped for the latter, their eyes wide, bodies frozen, and the butterflies in their stomachs now replaced by swarms of wasps, anticipating the answer that would decide their fate.